Hi, my name is Chuck Sawyer, and I'm with Northwestern Health Sciences University. We're a proud partner with the city of Bloomington to commemorate the brave men and women who served during the era of the Vietnam War. It was a contentious time in our history, and the war was very unpopular with many Americans. Young men were being drafted, others volunteered to serve, and equally patriotic nurses cared for their combat injuries. For those who came home, their lives were changed forever. And I had the privilege recently of interviewing a few whose stories you will hear in this short video.
I got drafted in February of '64 into the Army. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, I was just bumping around dead-end jobs and tried school. And
it was 1969 before I joined. I had a number of friends that had gone over, and they came back, and they were very changed. So I had a pretty good feel that I was in a very bad situation. Either I volunteered or I was drafted, so I had very little choice in the matter. Though some people disagreed with me, but I wasn't going to go to Canada. It was not my style. It's not my family style.
I grew up in a family where my father was in the Second World War, and then he stayed in the reserves for almost 30 years. And so I kind of grew up with that.
I joined the Army in 1955 with a buddy. We were both going to be high school dropouts, and we had the buddy system in. And if you joined the Army, they said you'll stick together through the whole tour of service. Well, Jack went to the infantry and I went to tanks. We never saw each other again until after the war.
I graduated from high school and I wasn't planning on going to college, and that was the first year of the lottery draft. So I ended up with a number that eventually got called, so I just volunteered.
Got my bachelor's degree in education in English. And in the middle of my study at that university, the war broke out even worse when the Americans withdrew and along with the Allies. That was starting 1972. So our class was drafted. I think I was in junior year, so we all ended up at boot camp, and we received about 6 months of training.
When I first got my orders for Vietnam, I was a little nervous about that. I was scared. We heard some war stories, people coming back from Vietnam. I saw pictures of things over there.
Well, I had 4 months experience at Walter Reed when I got my orders to go, which I thought I'd be there a little longer because that's all the experience I had as a nurse then, because I went in right after I graduated.
You know, I was Air Force, so I wasn't going to be out in the jungle fighting hand-to-hand or anything like that, but it was still scary.
I didn't think I'd go quite that early because I knew I didn't know very much, but...
We got into Oakland, California, and do remember there were protesters outside the gate. They pulled the train inside, and we got right off of the train right onto a troop ship. It was the USS Blatchford, 5,000 military people on that one ship. I do remember going underneath the Oakland Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge and past Alcatraz, and then it took us about a month. I remember getting off that airplane, and it was so hot. It was unbelievable hot. And it was like I smelled, I don't know if it was psychological or what, but it was like I could smell blood and death. I
got my orders on a Friday, and I remember calling home to my parents and telling them, and my parents seemed rather blasé about it, you know, and I'm like, I'm going to Vietnam. My mother's going, well, I mean, you knew that, and you know, and my father's like, well, okay, and well, we have to go now, we're going out.
Well, you're flying in a commercial airplane, and then you saw all these little fires down there below, you know, on the ground, and you thought, is that battles, or is that just, you know, burning garbage or whatever? And that's what it turned out to be. But you know, you had these things going through your head the minute you were overhead, even, you know, before you even landed. It was just green and lush, and it was a beautiful country.
I was out in one of the revetments doing something or another, and they were big enough to hold 2 or 3 aircraft. All of a sudden, boom, a loud explosion. We had a bunker, sandbag bunker, about 100 feet, I think, from where I was. And I thought, if I can get to that bunker, I'll be okay. I went for the door of the office, and I heard one or two more rockets come in. And by the way, these were rockets, 140 millimeter Russian rockets. They carried a 10-pound warhead. But I was just going out the door. I remember I had my arms stretched out, pushing the door open, and boom, it hit, almost a direct hit. I did not realize, you know, I had lost anything, no arms or legs or whatever. I really thought I wasn't hurt very bad. And like I said, I thought, I got to get up and get to a bunker.
I was there probably 8 or 9 months, and we got overrun one night. We got hit by an NVA battalion, probably 500 men, and they blew through our bunker lines, and we had to fight them off from inside of our bunkers. And I got shot. About 20 of us got wounded or killed.
I tried to move. I tried to get up, and I couldn't move anything. I couldn't feel anything. And then it scared me. It just, all of a sudden, I think it was that point, I realized I got hit. And the fear came over me, just unbelievable fear. I've never experienced it before, and I never hope to never again.
Then they brought in the medevacs, and we had enough casualties, so the helicopters had to land inside of a very, very small perimeter. In fact, they couldn't normally get in there, but they flew those birds and dropped them in right next to our mess hall. And there were gunfights going on all around it. I mean, the NVA was in one part of the mess hall, our people were on the other end, and they were shooting through the doors. Through the doors, and the mess hall was never the same after that. There was bullet holes everywhere. But I remember we loaded us, I was on one of the second or third medevacs coming in. And I remember getting up in the air, and I could see the enemy used green tracers, and we used red. And I could see those green tracers going past the door as we were climbing out with the helicopter. And fortunately, we were able to get out, and they were 50 caliber rounds, so they're very substantial. So we were taking some fire, and we got out of there.
Yeah, I was in Cambodia in 1970, and pretty dense jungle. You couldn't see 2 feet in front of you sometimes, you know. The day I got injured, we were out setting up mines around the perimeter, so if anybody stalks at night, they'd hit one of those mines. We were heading back towards inside the perimeter, and I was looking down at the ground, and I noticed a tripwire and a spoon. That's how we put the tripwire in the mine, so that when the spoon got pulled out, just a plastic spoon, it would explode. I saw that laying there. The guy in front of me had tripped it. So it was inactivated at the time, but I knew instantly what that meant. It meant that somebody was unrolling their cord, and they would eventually plug it in. I said, we got to get out of here. We ran, started running, and then it hit, and then it blew up.
Our medic, the one I know for sure died, was our medic. He was shot and left to scream to try to draw us out of the bunkers. And at that point, nobody took any prisoners. They killed every wounded enemy they found in that situation. So it was something else. I mean, you never want to experience that again.
I was flat on my back in just a split second. Saw the big flash. The guy behind me was also down, and the guy in front of me was still running, so he didn't get hit. I got hit between the thigh and the upper arm, so that would be about 3 feet.
And then I think I was in and out, and pretty soon I felt somebody moving me. Later I found out it was a Navy corpsman. I heard him say, "This son of a bitch is dead." And he was talking about me. And I didn't like that. And I screamed at him. I said, "I'm not dead. I'm not dead."
I had injuries to my thigh, both arms, spleen. They took out my spleen, My liver was lacerated.
It was all rocket propelled grenades, machine gun fire, and sniper fire. Just had to be lucky.
When I heard him say I was dead, that scared the hell out of me, and I hollered at him. I talked to him later. I ran into him in the BX in Minneapolis, out at the Air Force Base out there, Navy base at that time, I think. And he told me I was deader than a doornail.
I think you go into shock immediately. My worst day was when my good friend, he was a platoon sergeant of the 2nd platoon, I was the 3rd platoon, Otis M. Farmer, got killed. Another time is when Escobedo got his head shot off, and I couldn't do anything for him. Those were fearful days.
And he said, for some reason or another, I don't know why, and he said he normally didn't do this, he would not take dead people and throw them in the truck or ambulance or whatever it was, and because he needed that room for carrying wounded. And he says, I don't know why, but I picked your body up and threw it in the truck, and he said, I threw you. And you went flying through the air, and I felt it. I remember hitting the floor of that truck, and it boom. And I heard somebody say, oh my God. Well, finally he said he drove about 5 miles while these rockets are coming in. We got 56 rockets in that night. And he said he ran into a fence and screwed up his radiator, and that was streaming out steam and everything. But finally he got over to Marble Mountain. It was a naval field station there, kind of a MASH type thing, I guess. When he got over there to Marble Mountain, he took my body and threw it out on the ground on the side of the road. And he said, I just threw it there and figured I'd come back later and tag you and whatever. And so he went back to Da Nang, get some more people, and when he got back to Marble Mountain, maybe an hour or 2 later, my body wasn't there. And he started asking around, what happened to the body I had here? And they said, well, it's in the operating room. He's being operated on.
I've left my unit and gone to the Da Nang hospital and visited wounded people. One of the worst guys that I ever had wounded, we dusted him off, and he went to Da Nang hospital. When I went down there to see him, he was gray. And they said, well, he's not going to make it. When I got back to Fort Knox, Kentucky, this person come running across with a snack bar and said, Sarge, Sarge. He made it. It's just an amazing, you don't know. You just really don't know. Sometimes the worst thing can turn out to be a good thing.
How somebody, I don't know how they realized I was alive. I may have said something, I don't know. I don't remember anything, but somebody somehow discovered I was alive, and they took me in, and I was in the operating room, and they saved my life.
So we knew that the war was getting worse and worse by the amount of refugees coming to town. It went from 7 or 8 million up to like 12, 13 million. And then when the Tet Offensive of 1968 came, I was in high school. So that was my first exposure to the war.
So the last place I went to was the VA in Minneapolis. And one of the people I met at that time was Ron Schwerman. And he was one of the people that I never forgot in all those years. And I met him once since then, and that was in 2009. And I saw this fellow in a wheelchair who was a triple amputee, and I kind of looked at him, and then I said, are you Ron from the VA in like 1967? And he says, yes. And I said, well, I knew you then, and I was a nursing aide on that floor, and my name's Mary Beth. And he said, I remember you.
I was in high school, and we volunteered this first aid groups. We went into the battlefield to help the families distribute food and medication, and also to refugees camps to help them And so that was the first time we saw our Air Force bombarding our own buildings. And then corpses, stinking, bombardment, massacring thousands and thousands of civilians trying to escape.
He just, at that time, I mean, for suffering all those kinds of injuries, he just seemed to be okay with life right then. But he just seemed to not really be angry at that point. He just seemed like a cool guy.
So we thought that we were doing what we really needed to do as the young people.
Vietnamese people, if they weren't shooting at you, were pretty good people. Kids loved you. We had women KPs, we had women working in our dining hall.
Where we were at, the villagers, they were very friendly. I mean, little kids, my heart just breaks for those kids. And they're funny, they got a sense of humor. They like to bug you a little bit.
One of the most friendly Vietnamese was a North Vietnamese who switched over to the other side and became part of my platoon. He was called a Chu Hoi. And a Chu Hoi, Sergeant Sung was his name. And every time I'd go into the bush or walk around, he'd be right behind me walking backwards with his rifle, so I wouldn't get shot in the back. So there were really, really good people, friendly people.
When I went over there, I went over there in the early stages, and it was like the Wild West, because the American military, we made a lot of mistakes, and the learning process. It was a learning process, I guess. And we got by with a lot of stuff that later on that you couldn't do. Now in Afghanistan and Iraq, these soldiers, they got 150 pounds of stuff on them. And over there, I mean, we had shorts. The first thing we did, we had shorts made. In our base camp, we had maybe a t-shirt, no shirt, and just our shorts and our boots, and it was very casual. And even when we'd go out in the field, you know, we'd just have a t-shirt on or something, and we didn't salute. When we're out in the field, we didn't have to salute the officers. They didn't want to get shot at.
Anybody who says they don't have it is lying. Because, I mean, I don't care who you are. Being in a war has got to affect you. And I don't think it happens right at first. It kind of sneaks up on you. And I think it's anxiety and depression and crying about stuff that you think, why am I crying about this?
When we got married, I was not aware that he had post-traumatic stress disorder. And we were very much in love as newlyweds and happy all the time. And then all of a sudden, without any provocation, he would explode and become somebody I did not know, a monster. And I had no idea where this anger came from.
We used to get the Life magazine. Remember when the Life magazine was out and they had the cover of the Vietnam War? They had an issue where there were children by the vets and the women. And so they had a picture of all these kids that were disowned because they had American fathers, okay? And there was a little girl in there. She must have been about 11 years old. It was a picture of her. And he brought that magazine to me. He said, see, I told you. And that little girl and I looked exactly alike.
What he did with his anger is every time he got anger, he'd stuff his musket. And then when he got angry again, he'd stuff his musket until your musket gets full and you have to let it all out. And we've done a lot of work just between the two of us of talking things out. And when he gets angry, he'll tell me he's angry. Or if he thinks I'm angry, he'll say, are you angry with me? And I'll go, no.
He said I reminded him of a gook. That's what he used to say to me. He said I reminded him of them. And when he would start drinking or he would be on his medication and stuff, he just would attack me. You know, he He said, I'm going to show you what I would do to one, you know, and that's, I lived in a very abusive relationship. That's what he saw in me when he saw her, and he showed it to me. That's when it hit me. And I realized that he's going to kill me if I stay in this.
I mean, they want to have physical pain when it's not the physical pain, it's the emotional one, but you don't want to acknowledge the emotional one. You want it to be a physical thing, but it really isn't.
He told the story about a good friend of his that was with him in Vietnam, and they were coming down the hill, you know, because they were front line, they were in the combat zone, and a grenade came, and his friend pushed him out of the way, and he got hit with a grenade, and Eric was, he was unconscious when the medic found him, and when he opened his eyes, he saw his hand on his chest, and his ring was there. And so it was his parts that was on Eric's body that he saw. And that's when he lost it. And that's the only thing that really stuck with him. He kept reliving that over and over. That's what messed him up, was to see that, to go through that. I think everything else he went through became very small in comparison to that incident right there, because that's the only thing he ever talked about. He didn't talk about anything else. He was stuck right there because of that guy that gave his life for him.
Your heart is hurting, so you're going to say it's your shoulder or your knee or your back, but it's in your heart. And the only way you can deal with it is to deal with the sorrow.
The whole value of the whole thing was could never be explained. While we were fighting in a war, we had never been attacked. What we were going to get out of it, other than the so-called domino theory, which, you know, whatever that means.
At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. And I was over there to take care of GIs. And on the side, I was over there taking care of little kids. I would have taken wherever I was supposed to be. I would have taken care of people in Detroit. I would have taken care of old people in Texas. I didn't care. I was supposed to take care of people someplace.
You always have to remember that 1 million Vietnamese died in combat over there, or from bombing and so on. You know, our losses were bad enough, but that is kind of hard to believe.
Well, there were good days and bad days. I left my car on blocks in Pennsylvania. When I got back, I took it off the blocks and put the wheels on and was going down to get it inspected. And cop stopped, policeman stopped in and said, your license plate is, I do. I said, I just got back from Vietnam yesterday. He says, I don't give a blank. I was fighting here too. $150 ticket.
I always hoped that my older brother would talk about his experience in Vietnam, because he held everything in, and he's quiet. You know, he was a perfect Marine. When I see him, he still walks, you know, completely erect with his head up high, no matter what he's going through. Even when he was told he had cancer and he had to have this surgery, you know, no chemo. I'm not doing any of that. But I have also seen the other side. When he talks about Vietnam, that takes him to a dark place, you know. And when it takes him there, it takes you there. The anger, the frustration, everything comes out, you know, the profanity, you know, everything comes out. And the volume goes up here. It goes beyond where he is. And the last time he did that to me, I just completely shut down, and I didn't say anything. But when he started coming down, right here, he thanked me. He said, thank you for listening to me. Thank you for allowing me to get that out.
It's nice talking about this. You don't talk about it unless somebody asks you to talk about it. it helps me to get it off my chest and get those feelings out to him.
And I do think of Corporal Owens Lavery, that he was a friend that didn't come back. And I feel bad that he never was able to live that life, and for what? I mean, what was proven over there?
But I consider myself a very lucky man. Very, very lucky.